I got to interview Andrzej Sapkowski, the author of The Witcher. At least kind of.
Okay, answering the Vera's question.
Thanks to all of your support, a couple of months ago, the Orbit team reached out to me and told me that they will be doing a series of question and answer videos with the author Andrzej Sapkowski, author of the Witcher book series, in the lead up to the English release of the newest installment in the Witcher series called Crossroads of Ravens. They were asking people to send in questions for Andrzej Sapkowski that he would then potentially answer if your question was lucky enough to be selected in a video response. And I have great news. 2 of the questions that I sent in were selected and presented to the author of The Witcher, the most important series in my life, a series that I grew up adoring, an author whose work I learned about in school and have really looked up to ever since then. The first question that I got to ask is much more fun. It's coming from the perspective of me just being a fan. But the second question is much more juicy, I think, and especially the response that I've gotten, I think will ruffle some feathers, but it simultaneously reveals a reason why I love The Witcher so much. So without further ado, my first question was, we first met Geralt of Rivia through the lens of fairy tale retellings, from Polish stories like Roman Zmorski's Stryga or The Legend of the Wawel Dragon, to foreign ones like Andersen's The Snow Queen. Is there a legend, story, or fairy tale that you didn't draw from, but think that would be particularly interesting to see play out in the world of The Witcher?
Okay, answering the Vera's question. I suppose the sky is the limit. Let's say that it is resources of fairy tales and legends are bottomless. So you can choose whatever you want. But it is, of course, not so easy task because you must base a good storyline, a good plot on it. Some legends and fairy tales are more convenient to do it, some are less. You choose it.
Firstly, just on a very superficial level, I know this is like major fan behavior, and I'm really trying to be professional about it, but the fact that Andrzej Sapkowski said my name. I know this is like major just fangirl behavior, but I've seen this man in magazines, on the TV. I've seen his name, his picture in my grandparents' library. It's really surreal to me that I heard my name come out of his mouth. So yeah, I don't know. It made me feel very special. As for the response, I think he's totally right. There are some fairy tales that are much more conducive to being put in a story like The Witcher. Actually, a video that I'm thinking of doing is a ranking of The Witcher short stories. And I definitely think that the ones that are more so a favorite of mine do also link with how well the story that they are based on lends itself to adaptation. I really love the stories that play with and elevate the themes of the original fairy tale that they are based on. I do kind of wish that he would have told us a fairy tale that he would have loved to put in the Witcher story. But on the other hand, let him keep his cards close to his chest. And who knows, maybe one day there will be another book where we get more fairy tale-esque aspects to it. And I'd love to be surprised to see what he has up his sleeve. My second question was, what sparked the idea for Crossroads of Ravens? How did you approach writing young Geralt differently than older Geralt?
Well, the main story of The Witcher, as everybody knows, was finished. So for me, it was impossible to write anything what happened after, because there is no after. The story is finished. Stop. The end. So what was left? Prequels and sidequels. I've done a sidequel called Season of Storms. And right now, let's say, also a sidequel, not a prequel, because I still can write something what happened even before Crossroads. So let's consider Crossroads as a sidequel as well. And if I will do anything more, which I intend, it will be sidebar also, because there's no other way. The story is finished. There will be no prolongation of the plot. The plot is closed. The curtain has fallen.
Okay, so let's talk about that response, shall we? I really think that there is quite a bit to unpack. And I think you may have caught on to why I said that this response might ruffle some feathers. But first things first, out of the way, he said that he might write something else in the Witcher world in the future. I think this is incredible news. I am ashamed to admit that I have not read Season of Storms yet. That is because as I mentioned previously actually on the channel, when I moved to Ireland for college, I really wanted to leave a piece of home for myself that I can read when I feel homesick, and I just haven't felt homesick that much yet. Well, I did earlier this year, but not like majorly, and I had exams at that point. But when I feel very, very, very homesick, then that's when I'm leaving Seasons of Storms for, because I know it's going to be like a hug delving into a world that I love so much and that is so intrinsically tied to my country. So I haven't read that sidequel, and I'm so sorry, and I will do it at some point. I will. And maybe I'll push the date at which I read Season of Storms earlier, especially knowing that Sapkowski wants to write more in The Witcher. By now, since Crossroads of Ravens is out, if any of you have finished it, please let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to discuss. But in my opinion, based on what we see in Crossroads of Ravens, and just how Sapkowski likes to play with all these little thematic nuggets that were very much in the main series, but maybe weren't the highlight of the main series. He loves to take them and put them under a bigger microscope, and he definitely does that in Crossroads of Ravens. So if there are any other of these little nuggets, little themes, or characters or areas that he'd like to give us more insight into, then I would love for him to do that. And yeah, going by what we have in Crossroads of Ravens, I am just really excited for whatever he decides to cook up next, if you will. But then there is the other stuff that he said. Mainly, he says very definitively, as we all know, the story is finished. The curtain has dropped. There will be no prolongation. Okay, so if you aren't familiar with Andrzej Sapkowski, the author, I don't think he really likes to be questioned about the video games. And the video games really were a prolongation of the main story of The Witcher. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil the ending of the Witcher books, but let's just say that the ending is very specific to what Sapkowski was trying to accomplish with the series. And in order for CDPR to make the Witcher video games a sequel to the Witcher books, they had to do I don't even know if you can call it a retcon, because the ending of The Witcher, an aspect of it is quite ambiguous, but they did have to choose a path in this fork in the road that Sapkowski leaves us with. They had to choose to turn a uncertainty into a certainty and then resolve said uncertainty. I'm really hoping that I'm making some sense. And famously, there was a little bit of bad blood between CDPR and Sapkowski a couple of years ago. They've all resolved that now. He's actually visited the studio like for the production of The Witcher 4, but that was something that was present in the past. From what I understand of his perspective, and I love his interviews, I've watched a couple of them at this point, he, when talking about The Witcher, really likes to just talk about his creation, and he really sees his creation of The Witcher books, as separate to the TV show and the video games. And to be honest, I think that is so fair. So my biggest worry, I guess, is that I don't want people to interpret this response as like a dig at the video games, because I don't think it is a dig at the video games. And personally, the fact that he says that the curtain is done, it's dropped, and hearing that he will never ever write a sequel to the series, that makes me so happy. And That's because it ties into an aspect of The Witcher that I think makes it very special. Again, no spoilers, but my favorite reading of The Witcher is to see it as an exploration of how we chronicle history. If you're interested in a more detailed video of this analysis, then let me know, because it's in my opinion the definitive way of reading The Witcher, obviously. The way The Witcher is structured as a series is very interesting and unique. So the first two books are anthologies of short stories that are retellings of legends and fairy tales in the Witcher world, similar to how in real life we have these legends and fairy tales and epics, like the Iliad, the Odyssey, all the different mythologies. And we really believed at a certain point in time that that was fact. Now we know that those are epics and legends and stories, but again, that was history at a certain point in time. Then we get to the saga, and the saga is more so an exploration of this idea that, yes, there can be huge military conflicts, things like that, but and that is what is written ultimately in the history books. But there are so many little moments between people, conversations that never will be recorded, or encounters on the battlefield that mean everything for a certain person, or maybe that even has repercussions further on down the line. But because they aren't like the big and grandiose things, or with the big and grandiose characters in history that write the histories later, they're just never written about. And so because of that, we can't really ever have an objective view of the causes and effects that create the story of humanity. That is done in the saga by decentering the huge Nilfgaardian versus Northern Kingdoms conflict, and instead focusing on the family unit of Geralt, Ciri, and Yen, and telling that story from a perspective of a father trying to protect and find his daughter. The final book in the saga, The Lady of the Lake, takes this aspect of these musings on how do we tell history, and it takes it to the next level, because a lot of the book is framed as these two historians from the future looking back on what was going on in the past couple of books, with a scholarly eye, if you will. They examine it the same way that we would examine the Renaissance, the Reformation, the World War I and II. They have a certain detachment to it. They have questions, and it's really interesting to see how changed the stories of what we know actually happened, how changed they become from that scholarly aspect a couple hundred years in the future. Some aspects of the story itself actually become kind of like legends and fairy tales in and of themselves. And through these two scholars, we also find out what the response to all these actions and conflicts that we were reading about, like how that is being perceived in modern day, I guess. And so I think that the choice to change the framing of the narrative so drastically in the final book, I think that is super, super intentional. I think everything that Andrzej Sapkowski does is very, very intentional. And I think that is to hammer in this question into you so that you question, how do we tell stories? Who is telling the stories, etc., etc. Also, I just think it's really cool. I think it's really cool and unique for a fantasy book. And so as you're kind of getting, I hope, from this little rant of mine, I think that the ambiguity of history, the what is lost when we tell history, when we chronicle history, that is a concept, in my opinion, that Andrzej Sapkowski finds to be very interesting and wants us to question a lot. And so building on that idea, there is a certain ambiguity to the ending of the final Witcher book that I think is very important to ensuring the sanctity of this theme. After all, if we as readers get a definitive answer of what exactly happens at the end of the series, well, that kind of undermines this idea of, in history, we never really know what was the absolute total 100% truthful account. Now, I understand some people can find this very frustrating, but in my opinion, it's just something that makes The Witcher stick with you for so long, because there are so many different ways that you can examine The Witcher through that lens of the unreliability of history and the and Andrzej Sapkowski's unwillingness to give us an easy answer hammers that point in. And I think that it is an incredible choice to end such an incredible series. Anyway, that little rant over. It makes 100% sense to me why he doesn't want to write a sequel, and I just find it so incredibly reassuring that he doesn't want to write a sequel. However, I am so happy to hear my side quests are incoming. I guess a question that I would love to ask Andrzej Sapkowski now, just knowing his answers to these questions, is would you ever write a side quill or a prequel not about Geralt? I'm not saying that, Geralt is not an interesting character or whatever. Obviously he is. And we've seen him through so many lenses. We see him as like a growing character in Crossroads of Ravens. We see him as a mostly like static grown up one during the series. We see him in so many different roles, and he is so well delineated that I'm just curious, would he ever want to venture out? And if he would, then what characters would he want to explore? I just think that would be fascinating. But yeah, guys, I honestly am speechless. When I got the email with Andrzej Sapkowski's responses to my questions, I actually shed a tear. It just feels so surreal. Thank you so much for supporting me and giving me this opportunity. Let me know in the comments what you think of his responses, and if you had the chance to ask Andrzej Sapkowski a question, what question would you ask him? Who knows? Maybe someday in the future. Hopefully, maybe one day I would be able to actually sit down with Andrzej Sapkowski and have a conversation. I think that would... I think that would be the peak of my YouTube career, if you will. So if you aren't already subscribed, please subscribe, like this video, go back and watch my back catalog of Witcher videos. There's definitely more to come. Thanks so much for watching. That's all from me, and I'll see you in another video. Bye-bye.